My parents looked me in the eye and said they loved my brother's kids more than mine. Then they told me my children weren't welcome at Thanksgiving. What they didn't expect was that I would walk away for good. Thanksgiving was only a few weeks away when my phone lit up with my mom's name. For a second, I just stared at it, my heart doing that familiar thing it always did when it came to her, a mix of hope and hesitation. I answered anyway. Her voice was light, almost cheerful. Too cheerful. "Honey, we need to talk about Thanksgiving this year." And just like that, a small warmth spread through my chest. Maybe this time would be different. Despite everything, all the distance, the quiet tension that had built over the years, there was still a part of me that wanted things to feel normal again. "My kids would love that," I said softly, already picturing it in my head. Emma laughing in the living room, Lucas running around with his toys, the smell of roasted turkey filling the house, the kind of family moment I kept trying to hold on to. But then she went quiet. Not a natural pause, the kind that feels heavy, the kind that warns you something isn't right. "This year," she finally said, "we're doing something a little different." My grip tightened slightly on the phone. "What do you mean?" Another pause, longer this time. "It's going to be a smaller dinner, just adults, something more peaceful." I frowned, trying to process it. "So no kids?" Silence, and in that silence I already knew the answer. "Well, not exactly," she said carefully. A cold feeling crept into my chest. "What does that mean?" She sighed like I was the one making this difficult. "We love your kids, Allie, we really do, but they can be a little energetic." I didn't say anything, because suddenly everything was starting to make sense. The missed events, the smaller gifts, the way my children were always treated just a little differently. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly, my voice tightening. "My kids aren't invited?" Another pause, then the words that changed everything. "Daniel and Sophie are bringing their boys, but you know how well-behaved they are." And just like that, whatever hope I had left was gone. The words hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. I sank against the kitchen counter, my phone still clutched in my trembling hand. My children, Emma and Lucas, 7 and 4, my whole world, my heartbeat, they weren't welcome at the one place I'd always believed should be safe, their grandparents' home. I could hear them in the next room, giggling as they built a pillow fort, their innocence untouched by the cruelty I had just been handed. And in that moment, a wave of anger and sadness crashed over me. All the years I had tried to please my parents, to earn their approval, to be good enough, it all came crashing down. Daniel, the golden child, always praised, always perfect, always rewarded, even when he did the bare minimum. And now his children were welcome, mine weren't. I swallowed the lump in my throat, fighting the tears that wanted to fall. "They're just kids," I whispered to myself. "Sweet, loving, harmless kids. Why aren't they enough?" Her words lingered in my ears, so calm, so casual, as if excluding my children was something reasonable, something polite. It wasn't just Thanksgiving. It was a message, a lifetime of favoritism, of comparisons, of my kids being treated as an afterthought, all wrapped up into one cruel sentence. I clenched my fists, knuckles white. I remembered every school play I'd attended for Daniel's kids, every recital, every holiday, every little thing I had done to try to make my parents happy, while my children watched from the sidelines, not out of choice, but because they were too energetic, too much. And for the first time, I realized something. I didn't have to bend anymore. I didn't have to fit into their perfect little world. Their table wasn't the only one that mattered. My children deserved better. I deserved better. I took a deep breath and made a decision in that moment. If my children weren't welcome, neither was I. And for the first time in my life, I felt a strange mix of liberation and power, because walking away wasn't just an act of defiance, it was an act of love for my kids, for myself. The anger inside me simmered, but it was focused now. I wasn't just upset about Thanksgiving. I was done with the entire pattern: favoritism, manipulation, lies. I would not allow it to touch my family again. And just like that, the first step toward freedom was taken. I stood in my kitchen, phone clutched tightly in my hand, staring at the blank screen as the words from my mom replayed in my mind. "They're a bit energetic. It would be better if you left them with a sitter." My stomach churned, my chest tightened, and for a moment I wanted to scream, to beg, to explain. But deep down, I knew I had tried that my entire life, pleasing them, bending to their expectations, hoping one day it would be enough. Tonight, it wasn't. Tonight, it never would be. I swallowed hard, and in that silence, clarity struck. This wasn't just about Thanksgiving. It was never about the turkey or the decorations or even Daniel's perfect little boys. It was about respect, love, and fairness, and they had made it clear my children were not welcome. My kids, the ones I carried, the ones I nurtured, the ones who lit up my life, were being treated like they didn't matter, and I wouldn't stand for it anymore. "No," I whispered to myself, the word tasting like fire in my mouth. "If my children aren't welcome, then neither am I." I felt a rush of freedom mixed with fear. Saying it out loud felt both terrifying and empowering. I dialed my mom again, my fingers trembling, and waited as the line rang. She picked up, unsuspecting. "Allie, are you reconsidering?" she asked, her voice soft, a little coaxing, a little patronizing. I drew in a deep breath, letting the silence stretch between us long enough to make my resolve crystal clear. "No, Mom, I meant what I said. If my kids aren't welcome, neither am I." There was a pause. I could hear her inhale sharply, as if I had just pushed her off a cliff. "Allie, you're being dramatic," she said finally, the words heavy with irritation. I let out a humorless laugh. Dramatic? For years, I had swallowed their favoritism, their dismissals, their subtle cruelty. I had smiled when Daniel's kids were celebrated, while mine were overlooked. I had tolerated the small injustices, convincing myself it wasn't that bad. Until tonight. Tonight, I wouldn't lie to myself. I wouldn't bend, compromise, or rationalize. I set the phone down, my hand shaking slightly, and turned to see Emma and Lucas laughing in the next room, unaware of the storm I had just weathered. My heart ached for them, but I also felt a flicker of pride. They deserved better than a family that valued entitlement over love, politeness over joy. They deserved a mother who would stand for them no matter what. I squared my shoulders, letting the weight of my decision settle in. I would not attend Thanksgiving without my children. I would not pretend that I had agreed to this injustice. I would no longer be the obedient daughter, the fixer of problems, the silent observer of favoritism. Tonight, I drew a line. Tonight, I chose my family, my real family, over the one that had never truly seen me. And for the first time, the anger in my chest didn't feel heavy. It felt righteous. It felt like the beginning of something new, something I had longed for but never allowed myself to embrace. I wasn't just walking away from a dinner. I was walking into freedom, into self-respect, and into a life where my children would always know they belonged. The morning after my decision, the house felt different, quiet. I ignored my mom's texts, leaving them unread, and let the calls from my father go straight to voicemail. For years, I had been their personal assistant, the one who dropped everything to run errands, fix problems, organize events, and keep the family machine running smoothly. Daniel got the praise, the attention, and the rewards for doing almost nothing, while I carried the weight of expectations silently. Not anymore. As I watched Emma and Lucas play, laughter spilling into the corners of our home, I realized something. I finally had the power. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bending, accommodating, or apologizing for existing. I was setting the rules, and they were consequences they couldn't ignore. By noon, a text from Daniel popped up. "Mom and Dad are upset. Are you seriously going to ignore them?" My thumb hovered over the screen, then I pressed delete. They had made their choices. Now it was my turn. I refused to let them manipulate me with guilt or to treat my children as bargaining chips. Hours later, my mother called again. I let it ring, let it build the tension. The silent treatment became my tool, my shield, my statement. Every ignored text, every unanswered call was a reminder that I was no longer at their mercy. The family that had always thrived on control and favoritism now had nothing over me. I prepared pancakes with Lucas and Emma, their flour-covered faces and giggles filling the kitchen with warmth my parents had never created. Liam poured hot cocoa, and together we set the table, not for anyone else, but for the people who mattered most, our family, our safe space. This was the first real taste of freedom. For the first time, I could see what life felt like without constant pressure to please, to accommodate, to survive someone else's expectations. My parents' power, the invisible leash I had been tethered to all these years, was gone, and they were furious because the power they had taken for granted no longer existed. By the evening, I knew this was more than a holiday snub. This was a complete shift in dynamics. I had stopped being their caretaker, their punching bag, their silent worker. I was finally visible, assertive, and untouchable in my convictions. For the first time, the family that thrived on control realized they didn't control me anymore, and that realization, more than anything, was intoxicating. Thanksgiving morning had always been a whirlwind of chaos, tension, and forced smiles. But this year was different. The house was calm, quiet, and ours. No frantic rush to get the kids dressed, no hiding mistakes, no anxious glances at the clock to make sure we weren't late. Emma and Lucas giggled as they built their own little pillow fort, and for the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about anyone else's approval. I was making breakfast with Liam, flipping pancakes while the kids stirred batter and stole bites when they thought we weren't looking. The smell of cinnamon and maple syrup filled the air, mixing with the sound of laughter, a sound I hadn't realized I had missed so desperately. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel light, free, like the weight of years of expectation had finally lifted. Then my phone rang. The screen flashed, "Mom." My chest tightened. I hesitated, Liam shooting me a concerned glance. "Want me to turn it off?" he asked, softly. I shook my head, heart racing. If it was really urgent, I deserved to hear it. I answered, keeping my voice flat. "What is it?" "Oh, now you pick up," she huffed. "I suppose you're sitting at home feeling sorry for yourself while we're all having a lovely Thanksgiving." I inhaled slowly, calming my anger. "If you called to gloat, I don't have time for it." Her voice turned sharp. "I need to ask you something." My stomach sank. My hands gripped the counter. I braced myself for what I knew would be another twist, another attempt to pull me into their world. And sure enough, it came. A story about the kids being left out, a reminder that Daniel's children were welcome while mine were not. But this time, instead of guilt or panic, I felt clarity. "No," I said quietly, firmly. "Emma and Lucas aren't unwelcome because they're misbehaving or noisy. They're unwelcome because you've chosen favoritism, and I refuse to participate in that. This Thanksgiving is for my children, my family, and the love we create together. If you don't like it, that's your choice, not ours." There was silence on the line. I could almost hear her frustration, disbelief, and panic. But for the first time, I wasn't apologizing, negotiating, or pleading. I hung up. Turning to the living room, I saw Emma and Lucas still laughing, their little hands covered in flour, eyes sparkling with joy. Liam smiled at me, pride and relief in his gaze. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Thanksgiving wasn't about my parents anymore. It was about us, our love, our joy, and the family we had chosen to protect. I served pancakes, poured cocoa, and sat with them, letting the warmth of our laughter fill the room. That Thanksgiving, I didn't feel rejected. I felt powerful, unshakable, and fiercely protective of the children I loved more than anything. It was a quiet week after Thanksgiving. I thought they might have accepted the message that my family was no longer theirs to control. But silence can be deceiving. 3 days before Christmas, the mailbox rattled with a heavy envelope. Liam frowned as he handed it to me. "It's from your parents," he said. My stomach sank. I tore it open, expecting guilt trips, but what I found was worse. A formal demand for reimbursement, years of emotional and financial support, itemized down to food, clothes, and school supplies, totaling nearly $80,000. I laughed, disbelief and fury tangled together. "They actually expect me to pay them for raising me?" I muttered, holding the letter up. Liam's jaw tightened as he scanned the pages. "This is beyond desperate," he said. It wasn't about money, never had been. It was about control, a last-ditch attempt to drag me back into their world. I clenched the letter and made a decision. Tomorrow, they'd see exactly who I had become, someone who refused to be manipulated. The next morning, I drove to their house. Each step felt like a victory march. I knocked. Mom opened the door, her face immediately hardening. "Oh, so now you show up," she sneered. I held up the letter. "You seriously thought this would work?" I asked, voice cold. Dad appeared behind her, smug as ever. "We sacrificed for you, and now you abandon us," he spat. "No," I said, stepping forward. "You abandoned me. You told me my kids weren't welcome, you stole from me, and now you're putting a price tag on my life. That ends today." Mom's lips pressed together. "Lawyers?" she hissed. "Go ahead," I said, unfazed. "Explain to a judge why you're suing your own daughter for expenses from 20 years ago. Show them how you treated my children, how you used me, and how you lied." Dad and Mom faltered. Their bravado cracked. I ripped the letter in half, the pieces fluttering to the ground like their power. I was done being their ATM, their puppet, their fool. I turned toward my car. Liam followed, eyes shining. "Merry Christmas," I said, over my shoulder, voice strong. And for the first time, I felt completely free. That day, I realized something profound. Their anger, their threats, their control, they were powerless against a parent who truly loved and protected their children. I had the power now, and I wasn't giving it back. The house was quiet, filled with the kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. No ringing phones, no guilt-laden texts, no looming threats. Just the soft laughter of Emma and Lucas chasing bubbles in the backyard, their little feet pattering across the grass, oblivious to the chaos that had consumed our lives for so long. Liam handed me a glass of lemonade and sat beside me, eyes reflecting the same relief I felt. I watched my children's faces light up, their joy untainted by anyone else's expectations. For the first time, I realized that our happiness didn't need anyone else's approval. No longer did I have to measure their smiles against my parents' standards. No longer had to worry whether my children were good enough to sit at a table that had never truly belonged to us. This was our world, and we were finally free to exist in it fully, without judgment. I felt a weight lift off my chest, the constant pressure to please, the invisible chains of manipulation, the endless cycle of proving my worth. All of it vanished. Every gift they withheld, every insult disguised as concern, every dollar they used without asking had been an attempt to control me, and yet here I was, untouched by their power, stronger than ever. Emma waved a bubble wand at me, her laughter contagious. Lucas ran over, holding out a half-melted marshmallow. I smiled, picking him up and twirling him around, feeling the warmth of family without conditions. In that moment, I realized freedom wasn't just about standing up to my parents. It was about choosing love and joy over resentment and obligation. We spent the afternoon baking cookies, watching movies, and decorating the house. Every smile, every giggle, every shared hug was a reminder that our family was real, chosen, and complete. No one could take that away. As the sun set, I sat back on the porch, holding Liam's hand and watching Emma and Lucas collapse in a heap of laughter and flour. I whispered softly to myself, "We are enough. We are free." For the first time, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and every day afterward belonged entirely to us, not to anyone else's expectations, rules, or judgments. I had my children, my partner, and our home filled with unconditional love. That was more than enough. That was everything. It was the week before Christmas when I finally decided that silence wasn't enough. Their manipulation, their entitlement, their constant attempts to guilt me into submission, it all had to end. I gripped the letter in my hands, the demand for reimbursement from years ago still burning in my mind, and drove to their house. My heart raced, but my resolve was unwavering. This wasn't just about money, it was about respect, boundaries, and protecting my children from a toxic legacy. I knocked, and Mom answered, her face carefully composed, hiding the irritation beneath a forced smile. "Oh, so now you show up," she said, her tone sharp. I didn't flinch. Instead, I held up the letter, letting it speak for me. "You seriously thought this would work?" I asked, my voice calm but icy. Dad appeared behind her, his usual smug expression in place. "We sacrificed a lot for you, Allie," he said, arms crossed, "and now you're abandoning us." I shook my head slowly, the anger and disbelief bubbling beneath my skin. "No, Dad, you abandoned me the moment you told my kids they weren't good enough for your table. You lied, stole from me, and put a price tag on my worth. I am not abandoning anyone. I am standing up for myself and my children." Mom's lips pressed into a thin line, eyes narrowing. "If you don't pay, we'll have to involve lawyers." I let out a short, sharp laugh, stepping forward with unwavering confidence. "Go ahead, take me to court. Try to explain to a judge why you're suing your own daughter for expenses from 20 years ago. Show them your version of love, the one that excludes my children and treats me like a cash machine." I could see the uncertainty flicker in their eyes, the cracks forming in their arrogance. Daniel gasped, his voice rising in panic. "Allie, come on." I cut him off, locking my gaze on my parents. "No, you have no case, you know it. And if you keep pushing me, I will make sure everyone knows exactly who you really are. Your manipulation, your greed, your favoritism, it stops here with me." For the first time, silence filled the room, not the tense, fearful silence of before, but the heavy, weighty pause of power shifting. I had taken control, and there was nothing they could do to take it back. I turned on my heel, stepping into the cold winter air. "Merry Christmas," I called over my shoulder, voice steady, strong. Then I closed the door behind me. In that moment, I felt unshakable, free, and finally untouchable. Just days after Thanksgiving, the tension that had been simmering for weeks finally erupted. My parents, refusing to accept the consequences of their favoritism and manipulation, escalated things to a shocking new level. A formal legal notice had arrived in the mail, demanding reimbursement for years of financial and emotional support they claimed I owed. My jaw dropped as I read the numbers. Nearly $80,000 for my own childhood, as if love and family could be itemized and billed. I felt a surge of fury, but also clarity. This wasn't about money, it was about control. Every attempt to guilt me, to shame me for standing up for my children, was laid bare in that letter. It was a desperate move, a last-ditch effort to pull me back into their world of entitlement and manipulation. The next day, I drove to their house, letter in hand, knowing that this confrontation would decide everything. Mom answered, her forced cheerfulness a thin mask over impatience. "Oh, so now you show up," she said. I didn't hesitate. I held the letter up. "You really thought this would work?" My voice was steady, cold. Dad appeared, smirking. "We sacrificed for you, Allie, and now you're abandoning us." I shook my head. "No, you abandoned me the moment you told my kids they weren't welcome at Thanksgiving. You lied, you stole, and now you think a judge will side with you?" Mom's eyes narrowed. "We'll involve lawyers if we have to." I laughed, sharp and unwavering. "Go ahead, take me to court. Show them the family that values money over love. You have no case, and if you try this, everyone will see exactly who you are." For the first time, the power shifted. The people who had tried to control me for years were uncertain, exposed, and powerless. I walked away, unshaken, leaving them with nothing but their arrogance and my freedom. After the storm of legal threats, favoritism, and manipulation, a profound calm finally settled over my home. The tension that had shadowed every holiday, every family call, and every visit was gone. For the first time, I realized I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their conditional love. I had my children, my real family, the people who truly mattered. Emma and Lucas were the heartbeat of my world, their laughter echoing through the house as they chased bubbles in the sunlit yard. Liam watched them with a soft smile, and I felt a peace I had never known. No one could take that away. Not my parents, not Daniel, not even a legal threat. I had set boundaries, drawn lines, and claimed my life back. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about teaching my children that love cannot be bought, earned, or demanded. It is given freely and received without conditions. I was showing them that self-respect matters, that standing up for yourself and those you love is never wrong, and that toxic relationships don't deserve your energy. The holidays that had once been filled with stress, comparison, and hurt now became ours. We celebrated in our own way, creating traditions built on laughter, warmth, and choice. Pancakes for breakfast, board games in the living room, and bedtime stories that ended with hugs and kisses. No guilt, no pressure, no pretending. And in that quiet, golden afternoon, I understood something powerful. The real gift isn't the holidays, the gifts, or even the family bloodline. It's freedom. Freedom from manipulation, freedom from favoritism, and freedom to build a life filled with love and joy on my own terms. For the first time, I felt truly victorious. Not because I had won against my parents, but because I had finally won myself. My children, my family, our happiness, untouchable, unbreakable, and ours forever.